Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the virtual symposium on pedagogical innovations. Today, we're going to have topics across various disciplines: learning analytics, guided remediations, team-based learning, that is TBC, progressive entrustment decisions, and we have our exciting website launch today. I am Dr. Nimmy George, Assistant Professor, Department of Microbiology, PIMS. I am member IAME and also member of the magazine committee, and I'll be the host for today. I request all the participants to kindly put their audio on mute and type your queries in the chat box. And we'll move to our first session of the day by Dr. R. Rajalakshmi. She is Associate Professor, Department of Physiology, Chipma, Puducherry. Ma'am has made significant contributions in psychiatric disorders, oncology, and obesity and OSA. Her field of interest include cardiovascular and autonomic neurophysiology, yoga therapy, medical education, and ethics. She's gotten over 13 years of teaching and research experiences in medical profession and has wonderful achievement and awards which are innumerable. So over to you, ma'am, to deliver your talk on learning analytics guided remediations.
Thank you, Dr. Nimmy. Thank you for that introduction. So I think we can move on to the session. I'll just share my slides. Is it visible?
Yes, ma'am.
So a very good evening to all respected faculty and members who have joined online. So myself, Dr. Rajalakshmi, working as Associate Professor in Physiology at Chipma, Puducherry. So I will be dealing this session on learning analytics, guided remediation for the next 20 to 25 minutes. So with respect to this topic, I think this topic, some of you must be aware of what is learning analytics, while some of you may be wondering what is learning analytics. But I promise that this is actually a topic which I think we as faculty and as teachers, we are doing in and out, but not knowing that, the work has been given some medical jargon called as, or a medical education jargon called as learning analytics. So, so the crux of this session would be to find out or to learn how learning analytics, which we are doing in everyday basis, can actually help improve our learners' outcomes. So that is what we are going to see in this session. So the schema of my presentation would be to tell what is learning analytics, why is learning analytics important, what are the different learning analytics methods, what are all the challenges which we might face while we are trying to implement learning analytics, and how to implement learning analytics in your own organization if you do not have done so far. And learning analytics guided remediation will be the last part of this session. So what is learning analytics? So for some of you who are new to learning analytics is basically collection and analysis of learner-related educational data, which will provide us insights about the learners and the learning context. It will also report about the patterns and the trends which we can observe in the learning outcomes of our learners, and it will also help predict the learners' outcomes. But learning analytics as such is complete only when it is actually associated with an educational intervention. So we will be seeing more in detail about this learning analytics in the upcoming slide. So what is the purpose of this learning analytics? So basically, when we perform learning analytics, it enhances the learning progress. It helps us understand how our students learn. It helps us to identify the underserved learners, and it also helps us to evaluate the effectiveness of the program or the course which we are actually running. The second purpose of performing the learning analytics is that it helps us to enable personalized learning. So in fact, the results of learning analytics will help us optimize the learning for our learners, and it also tailors the content and delivery to the individual learner's needs. The third purpose of performing a learning analytics is that it also helps to drive the students' engagement. So depending upon the results of our learning analytics, we can actually fine-tune our course or our training program in such a way that the learners will get more motivated and they will also be more engaged with our teaching learning sessions. The learning analytics also helps optimize the resource allocation. For example, when we know about the results about the learning analytics, we get to know where are all the resources and what are all the resources which are needed to improve our learners' outcomes, be it in terms of manpower, money, material, etc. And this way, this will actually help in improving the learning environment of our learners. And learning analytics also promotes targeted remediation because we will be able to, identify the underserved learners and we will be able to provide them with targeted remediation measures. So now that we have seen the purpose of doing the learning analytics, so now somebody can ask, what are all the components of learning analytics? So what will we be including in this analysis of learning analytics? So the components of learning analytics includes the internal assessment marks of our learners, which could be theory marks, it could be practicals, it could be workplace-based assessment scores, which includes the mini clinical examinations, the job scores. It could be the EPA's activities, which our learners have performed. It could be the logbooks and the e-portfolio analysis. It could be about the attendance and the posting completion of our learners. It could be the reflecting writing and also the feedback comments which we have received from our learners. It could also be analysis of the devices which our learners are actually using to access the learning materials. And it could also be analysis of the time which the learners are actually spending for learning the learning resources and also the duration which they are actually spending for learning the learning resources. So now that we have seen about the components of the learning analytics, I think most of you must be now thinking that, yes, we are already analyzing these, but we do not know how to implement it. Yes. So what are the different methods by which we can actually perform this learning analytics? So the first method by which we can do the learning analytics is that it is actually called as descriptive analytics. It's a very simple analytics techniques. Basically, it is a statistical techniques wherein we are going to answer the question, what happened? So we're going to ask what happened. So this way, we will be analyzing or summarizing the learning data. We will be able to track the attendance, the scores, and also the completion rate of our students. And the descriptive analytics also helps identify patterns and trends, and it shows how the current learning system is actually performing for our students. Is the current curriculum okay, or is it the current training program needs to be improved, or can it be continued in the same method? So these are the different things which you can actually arrive at when you perform a descriptive analytics. The second method by which you can do a learning analytics is actually called as the diagnostic analytics. This is one step ahead of descriptive analytics. So here we are actually going to ask, why did it happen? So why are the students not performing well? Why are the students constantly being absent for the class? So these are the questions which we will be trying to answer, and we will be trying to diagnose the reasons for this. So basically in diagnostic analysis, we are actually exploring the causes behind the performance. We will be able to identify the anomalies and also the patterns. We will be able to reveal the relationship between the events and outcomes and the most important areas which require special attention. One step ahead of diagnostic analytics is actually the predictive analytics. So in predictive analytics, in fact, we can actually predict what will happen next. So predictive analytics uses a lot of models, like it could be regression models, it could be machine learning, it could be neural networks, wherein you will be able to detect the emerging trends and we will be able to predict the future learner behavior as well. And this, in fact, the predictive analysis actually helps support early warning systems. And the last one is actually called as the prescriptive analytics. So in prescriptive analytics, we are actually going to prescribe a treatment. We are going to prescribe a remediation program for our students. So we're going to see how we can improve the learning outcomes of our students. So in prescriptive analytics, the results of the prescriptive analytics will help to recommend specific actions. It will support personalized learning paths for our students and also targeted remediation measures. So now that we have seen the components of learning analytics and we have also seen the different methods by which we can do the analysis, there are certain challenges definitely which we might come across when we are implementing this learning analytics. The first main challenge is actually defining the educational problem. Just as we do any research project, we always start with a research question. So it is also important that we identify the educational problem which we are trying to address. So just because we have data in our hand, it doesn't mean that we can actually meddle with the data and we can do the analysis and we can write up a paper. Ideally, it is important that we articulate the specific problem to be solved, and this starts with a clear purpose for using the analytics. Remember, it should always be the problem which drives the analytics and not the other way around. So defining the educational problem to be solved is the first important challenge which we will face when we are trying to implement the learning analytics. The second challenge is about recognizing what must be built. So the learning analytics is in fact a new and it is actually evolving technique. And in fact, institutions must intentionally build their own programs. For example, the learning analytics program which I designed for my institute may not be applicable at your institute. So that is why we say that no one size fits all solutions. So therefore, this learning analytics program, of course, we need to expect a lot of trial and error methods, and it requires a lot of iterations, because as and when you do the analysis, you will get to know that these are the points or these are the areas in which we have to improve our analysis and also the procedure. So there will be a continuous refinement as the program matures. The third challenge which we might come across while implementing the learning analytics is understanding the target audience. So who are our audience? Is it the students, or is it the faculty, or is it the institution as a whole? And who is going to govern the data? Is it the data going to be governed at the departmental level, or is the data which you have in hand is going to be governed at the institute level? So that is the third important challenge which we might face while we are implementing LA. The fourth challenge which we might come across while implementing LA is actually allocating time and resources and the plan for iteration. Of course, learning analytics requires a lot of resources in terms of manpower, money, material, time, etc., because it will undergo a lot of multiple developmental cycles. And you need to expect flaws once a program goes live, and learning analytics is not just a one-time exercise. The fifth challenge which you might face while implementing learning analytics is about managing large data. Because now that we have, some colleges have 150 students, some colleges have 200 students, some have 250 students, and so on. So we will have a large amount of data in hand to analyze, and therefore our systems and resources must also be capable enough to manage such large amount of data. And finally, the most important challenge in implementing the learning analytics will be the data security. So in fact, it is important that we protect the learner's data, and we need to identify at the first step who is going to access the data and where will the data be stored and how will it be safeguarded. So these are some things which we should always keep in mind when we are trying to implement the learning analytics method. So now some of you might ask you, okay, ma'am, I have the data in our institute. Now how to implement the learning analytics? So the question is, do we need really a software platform to do the learning analytics? So the answer to this would be yes, but not just a software platform. In fact, learning analytics is not a software first, it is actually the problem first. So as I said, the first step in performing the learning analytics is to identify the problem which you really want to address. So once you have identified the problem, then you step on to learning analytics. So because learning analytics is basically just a software platform which is just going to collect your data, it is going to integrate, and you're going to visualize the data, but it is not going to provide any solution as such. Now, what platform you choose, that actually depends on your questions. It also depends on your goals. It depends upon the data which is available in your hand. It also depends upon the scale of the learners. Are you going to deal with undergraduates or postgraduates, or is it going to be faculty? Who are the people who will act on the insights which you gain by doing the data analytics or the learning analytics? So to start with, you can use even simple tools for learning analytics, like you can use a simple learning management system, you can use spreadsheets, you can use dashboards, etc. to start with initially. But later on, you can actually go for upgraded platforms, provided you have very large amount of data and your learners' numbers also increase, and suppose you need an actionable remediation, which is actually expected. So now that we have seen, so I can also give you a list of some local analytics tools which are actually available free or open source, or those which are available at low cost. So these local analytics tools, or those for the learning analytics tools, they are actually available, and they can be very good for starting, and they can be used even for piloting your learning analytics techniques. So the first common tool, which is very well used in most of the medical colleges, is actually the Moodle, because it has an inbuilt learning analytics platform in which you can actually see the students' activity completion, you can see the grade trends, and so on. The second one common thing is actually the Google Analytics, which actually tracks the learner's engagement with online modules, with videos and also web pages. The third one is Open Lab. The fourth one being Learning Locker. Then the R or the Python, I think most of us must be aware of this. This is actually a very powerful tool for custom analytics. And in fact, it can also be used for the predictive modeling. But only problem with Python is that it actually requires a technical expertise. And last but not the least, which we are all, we are very well aware of, is the Microsoft Excel, a very simple but very effective tool to perform learning analytics. So it's very effective for early stage learning analytics, and it is very ideal for remediation tracking and faculty review meetings. Of course, this is actually, if you see, this is actually a Moodle platform learning analytics snapshot, which you can see that, in this page, you can see the number of participants who are, enrolled in this program. You can see the number of hits, that is the number of times the participants have visited this web page wherein you have created, the number of participants who have attended the quizzes and also answered the assignments and so on. So this is actually a learning analytics dashboard of Moodle. And this is actually the learning analytics dashboard of a simple Excel spreadsheet. Okay, so you can also see that even spreadsheets, Excel spreadsheets can be used for learning analytics. So now that we have seen the free platforms, now let's move on to the paid platforms. So I'm not going into the details of these platforms, but these are some of the paid platforms which can be used for learning analytics. So in addition to the advantages of the free platforms which we had seen earlier, these paid learning analytics platforms will actually help in advanced dashboards analysis. It will also provide a very high quality visual analytics. It also gives early alert systems, and it also helps to predict learner success. And you can also do a cohort analysis in addition to the individual analysis as well. So most institutions in India, they actually start with Moodle, which is actually quite simple. And they also combine it with Excel, and also they use simple dashboards. So in Indian medical colleges, a very effective learning analytics often looks like you just use a simple LMS platform wherein you can have, track of the attendance, the quiz scores, etc., the assessment and OSCE scores, and the portfolio and logbook data. So you start simple, you start small, and then you will be able to achieve greater later. So the next question would be to some of you, like, what should I do if I want to perform a learning analytics in my medical college, provided with a low cost, a low tech, and also, but you should have a high impact. So in that case, the first thing is that you should identify as to what data you already have. That is very important. Some of you must be having all this data already with you in your department or at your institution level. Like, for example, you must be having data about the attendance of your students, the scores, the activity completion, the internal assessment marks, the OSCE scores, the logbooks, the portfolios, as well as the faculty observations and their scoring. Remember, the less data you start analyzing, the less messier you will be. But if you are going to analyze a large amount of data, then it is actually going to be more messier, right? So the next thing which you will have to ask yourself is that, how am I going to capture the data? So either you can capture the data using Google Forms if you do not have sufficient data and you're going to do it in future. You can use simple Google Forms, or you can also use Microsoft Excel or Google Sheets. So this is how you're going to capture the data if you do not have data in hand. The next thing which you will be asking yourself is, how am I going to make sense of the data which I have already? So basically, you can actually make sense of the data which you have by using the Excel sheets. You can do trending charts. You can also go for traffic light coding, wherein you can actually code colors for learners. For example, red color for those who are actually slow learners, and green for actually who are actually above average performers, and so on. And while doing this analytics layer, basically you will be able to identify the learners who are actually falling behind, and what are all the competencies in which they are weak, and what is the remediation which is required, and is your remediation program really working or not? So this is the third step which you have to do if you're trying to implement the learning analytics at your institute. The fourth one which you need to ask is that, who will be able to, or who needs to see what? For example, if you are a faculty, you should be able to see the faculty dashboards, where you will be able to identify the learners who are at risk. You will be able to identify the learners who have missed the EPAs and so on. You should also have a student dashboard in which the student can know his own progress and he can also compare his progress with his peers. And there should also be an academic leadership dashboard, wherein you can also see a cohort performance trend as well. So this is the fourth step which you will have to ask yourself. The next one is about the action and the remediation layer. In the sense, now that you have the data, now that you have everything in hand, what is that which you are going to do after you have analyzed the data? So that is a fifth thing which you have to, think about when you are planning for learning analytics. So because you need to keep in mind about a structured remediation plan if you're going to identify underserved learners. And you should also have a faculty mentor assignments if required. And very importantly, you should also be documenting the follow-up. For example, you should be having a pre-post improvement tracking and so on. Finally, often forgotten but very critical is about the ethics. So who will be accessing the data? Who will protect the data? How are you going to protect the data? And who will be acting on the results of the learning analytics? So these are some of the questions which you need to ask yourself, and you need to get the answers for these questions before you actually plan for learning analytics at your institute. So let's see an example. So for example, the student A, he belongs to the second MBBS class, and you find out that he has repeated difficulty in cardiovascular examination. However, his internal assessment scores are actually borderline, but he has poor OSCE performance despite regular attendance. So now you are actually gathering the data. So from the data sources, you get to know that, his quiz scores are actually borderline. He has failed twice in OSCE with respect to cardiovascular system examination. You also get to know that from the data sources, you get to know his logbook is actually incomplete. And then you also get to know that he has not performed well in the mini clinical examination. Now, suppose you actually look at only the LMS quiz data, you will see that, or you will come to a conclusion that, the student is actually lacking some knowledge component with respect to cardiovascular system examination. But then when you actually examine all the data sources together, when you analyze all the data sources together, you will really know where the problem actually lies. So that comes the analytics. So in analytics, you will get to know about the pattern. So in the pattern, you will get to know that his knowledge is okay, but his skill is actually weak. So therefore, this will give you a flag that there is a cardiovascular system competency gap. Okay. So now, once the analytics is over, you're going to see. So who is going to see? The faculty will actually give a red flag for the cardiovascular system skills for the student. The student will also see his own dashboard, and he will get to know that he is not performing to the level which the others are actually performing. And coordinator, maybe your department head or the institute head, will also get to know that, it's not just a single learner, or it could be a group of learners who are actually not doing well in this particular OSCE. So the next step would be the action. So now you know that this is the problem with the learner. So you're moving into action. So what action are you planning? So you may be planning for small group cardiovascular system examination practices, or it could be a 1:1 mentoring which you can actually be planning for, or you can also be planning for the supervised examinations with timely feedback. And once you do this remediation measures, you also measure the outcomes after a certain period of time. And then you get to know that, yes, the mini clinical score examination scores are increasing, the OSCE scores are also improved, and the logbook has also been completed by the student. So this way, you get to know that at the end of your learning analytics, you are actually deriving at a remediation plan, and that remediation plan has really worked for you. So that is what you arrive at the end of learning analytics. So if you see the learning analytics, basically there are 4 important components in this learning analytics cycle. The first one being the learners, the second being the data, the third one being the metrics or the analysis which you're performing, and the last one being the interventions. Remember, the learning analytics is totally incomplete without an intervention. So if you're going to say that I'm going to perform only the analysis part and I'm not going to introduce any intervention, then it is not going to be of any use for your learners. So learners, yes, of course, they can be your UGs, it could be the PGs. And remember, the learners are actually the focus and they are the beneficiaries of your learning analytics. So if I ask a question to you, which learner group do you find hardest to support early when they struggle? So can any one of you unmute yourself and then can you answer this question?
D.
All?
Yes.
Okay. Anybody else with a different answer?
D.
D. Okay. So most of you, I think you all are agreeing with all equally. So all of them are actually equally, struggling to get the support. Right. All right. So the next important component is actually data generation and capture of learner data. So what are the data sources which we are going to use for analysis? This we have already seen in the second slide. It could be all the scores. It could be the Mini-Keck scores, the DOP scores, the logbooks, e-portfolios, and the feedbacks which you actually receive. So these are the data sources which we will need in hand when we want to perform the learning analytics. Of course, these data can be recorded automatically, or it could also be manually be recorded by the faculty as such. So now if I'm going to ask a question, which data source is most underused at your institute? Which you think will be the answer? Anybody?
D again.
D, reflections?
Reflection.
Yes. Okay.
A, C, and D.
B, C, and D. Okay, thank you. All right.
Madam, there is no option E, all of above.
All of the above. Okay, so yes, sir,
D,
taken. Yes,
D.
E, all of the above. Right, all right. So well taken. Thank you. So the third component of this learning analytics cycle is actually the data, which is now going to drive us to metrics or the analytics. So here the raw data is going to be processed into meaningful patterns. So what do you mean by patterns? We are going to see the trends in the students' performance, be it Mini-Kecks or need DOPS. We are also going to see the EPS entrustment progression over time. And we are also going to see the repeated below expectation ratings. So these are some of the trends which we will be able to see when we analyze the data. We will also be able to see if there are any recurring themes in the narrative feedback. Is there a mismatch in the performance of the student between the theory and the clinical performance? And what about his engagement and what about his attendance patterns? So these are some of the trends which we will come across when we do the analytics of the data which we have in hand. So this step is a very crucial step because this is the one which actually converts the documentation into insight. So we are now getting an insight of the learner's performance. So now we are going to ask you a question. How is students' data usually reviewed in your department? Is it reviewed at an individual faculty level, or is it through informal discussion, or is it structured review committee, or is it is rarely reviewed? So what will be the response?
A and B.
A and B. Okay. Individual faculty?
B.
And
Sorry?
sometimes it's informal discussion.
Okay. So you will have an informal discussion. All right. Any other reply?
E.
Sorry, sir? How many of you have a review committee in your own department or at your institute to review the students' data? Anybody?
C.
Yeah,
A.
at the institute level we have, but not in
All
the
right.
department.
Oh, that's nice. Okay. Thank you. Thank you for the response. And the last component in this learning analytics cycle is actually the intervention as well as the educational action, which is actually the most important part of the learning analytics cycle. In fact, this cycle is actually incomplete if you do not have an intervention. And it is analytics, it is important that we change into, an educational action. So what do you mean by interventions? Interventions could be anything. It could be right from a mentor-led remediation plan. It could be a targeted skill lab sessions, which you want to do for the students who are not doing well. Or it could be increased supervised clinical encounters for the students who are actually underperforming. Or it could be focused feedback and coaching. It could be adjustments in your teaching strategies so that, you get your learners more engaged. Or it could be a structured feedback and reflection for your students. Or it could also be a time-bound intervention, which could range from 4 to 8 weeks, depending upon your convenience. But remember, these interventions can either target, it could be an individual learner, if you identify an individual learner who is really struggling, or it could be a group of learners, or it could be a problem with the curriculum itself. In that case, you need to do an educational action for refining your curriculum as well. So now that we have finished all the 4 steps, the most important and last step is actually the reassessment and progress tracking. So now that you have done your remediation, so it is important that you repeat your workplace-based assessment for the students using the same standards. You do the EPA re-evaluation, the narrative feedback comparison before and after your remediation program. And this way, when you actually document it, you will get to know whether your remediation program is actually working or not. Do you have to exit out of the remediation, or do you have to escalate your remediation? Do you have to increase the steps in your remediation process? So therefore, this educational improvement depends on closing the feedback loop. So therefore, now that we have seen that the same learner can have two possible outcomes. If you're doing a learning analytics combined with an intervention or a remediation program, definitely this is going to improve the learning outcome of the learners who are in need. That's going to be a targeted improvement. But if it is going to be only analytics, then in that case, it is just yet another repeated documentation process which you're actually doing. So the difference lies in the faculty action. So it is our responsibility to combine both learning analytics and intervention for the remedial measures. So due to want of time, I'm just skipping this question, and now I'm moving to guided remediation. So whatever data we have in hand, so basically those data will actually help to identify the patterns, but this data is not going to provide us with any solution as such. It is our duty to interpret the learning analytics results meaningfully. That is very important. And all our interventions must be targeted, and it should also be learner specific. So how do we improve the effectiveness of the learning analytics? Number one, you can either speed up your intervention, or number two, you can scale up your intervention. Of course, the effectiveness of learner analytics actually depends upon key stakeholders. The stakeholders could be your learners, it could be the teachers, it could be the dean or the director of the institute, or it could be the policymakers like NMC. And of course, it is also influenced by policies and educational practices alone. Remember, the effectiveness of learning analytics does not depend upon the software which you are actually using for analyzing the data, be it a free software or be it a paid software. It all depends on how we interpret the data. So when you're trying to introduce an intervention at the learner levels, you get a very fast response. In fact, the learners can respond very quickly. And these interventions can be some interventions which can change the study strategies of your learners. It could also, improve their clinical skills, or it could also help in improving their engagement behaviors. So in fact, the impact of these interventions are mainly limited to self. That means they are mainly limited to the learners. Now, if you're planning an intervention after your learning analytics at the teacher level, in that case, this will have a moderate speed. And examples of interventions at the teacher levels, yes, you can think of some interventions like targeted feedback. It could be modified supervisions, or it could also be some remediation plans, which you can actually implement for your learners. And remember, these interventions can actually target individual learners, or it could also target a group of learners or a batch of students. And the response speed, of course, depends upon the workload for the faculty. It also depends upon the system and the institute to support your interventions. The third level of intervention is at the manager level. That means it could be at the level of the dean, it could be the principal or the director or whoever it is. Whenever you introduce an intervention at the manager level, yes, it is going to happen, but it will happen at a slower speed. And this basically relies on the reports from the faculty. And this, of course, will influence the posting structures. It could influence the faculty deployment, and it will also influence the resource allocation. So basically, the results of your learning analytics will help your manager, your dean or director to decide as to where the resources must be allocated more and what type of resources are required more for your learners. And the last is actually the interventions which we make at the policymaker level. So yes, of course, this is going to be the lowest speed and they are the slowest to respond, but yet they are more powerful because they are going to set the regulations, they are going to set the assessment standards, and they're also going to set the accreditation norms. And in fact, their decisions will affect the entire institution, and it can also affect the entire region or the nation. Now, coming to the last topic, that is the principles of guided remediation. So whenever you have analyzed the data and you have the results of your learning analytics, the next step, what I said, is that you have to think about some intervention or a remediation program. So therefore, early identification, early diagnosis, targeted remediation, and reassessment are the key principles of guided remediation. So for example, if you take this picture, it shows a 7-stage remediation process, wherein in stage 1, you are just identifying the lapses through information gathering. So you're just seeing the information, you're gathering where are all the gaps for the students, and then you're saying, okay, so maybe the student is lacking in knowledge, or it could be the skills, or it could be the attitude, or it could be the professionalism, etc. So then after that, what you are actually doing is that you are actually moving and talking to the student, and you're also confirming that, yes, whatever you have identified is right or wrong. So you're having a formal discussion with the student after your diagnosis. And once that is done, you're moving on to stage 4, wherein you are actually trying to introduce a remediation plan, and you're trying to negotiate it with the learner, saying that, yes, this is what I plan. Are you okay with it? So once you have done that negotiation, then after that, you implement that remediation plan. And once that remediation plan is actually implemented, after some time, you reassess the student and see if your remediation plan is working or not. So if it is working, well and good. You have to find the time when you have to exit. If it is not working, find out why it is not working and try to escalate it if it is actually required. So these are all the different steps which you have to adopt when you're thinking of a remediation program following your learning analytics. So to end, so learning analytics helps us identify what a student is struggling with, why he is struggling with, and what to do next. So learning analytics is incomplete if it is not accompanied with an intervention, and education improvement depends on closing the feedback loop. So we need to close the feedback loop. Without an intervention, the loop remains open. So learning analytics becomes educationally powerful only when it leads to deliberate action. And in CBME, the data without intervention is just documentation and it is not education. Thank you for your patience.
Thank you, ma'am, for such an insightful presentation on how we can apply the learning analytics in our daily teaching schedule as medical educationists. The floor is open for discussion. If anybody has any queries, they can type in the chat box. Okay. I think, ma'am, your presentation was so excellent that they.
Ma'am,
Yeah.
ma'am, can you speak?
Yeah, sure, ma'am. Come.
Yeah, ma'am, this is
You
Dr.
can.
Sarla Devi. Hello?
Yes,
Yeah,
ma'am.
ma'am.
Carry on.
We are audible, ma'am.
Yes, yes. I just would like to ask Dr. Rajalakshmi madam, is it being done in JIPMER, ma'am? What is your experiences?
Yes, ma'am. We actually
Challenges
do
for
it.
you?
We do it for the first years, but we do it informally, but not as a formal analytics. We do it at the departmental level.
I think we have a question in our chat box is how to start with Moodle.
Yeah, so Moodle actually, it's a learning management system. It's actually an interactive platform. So there are certain options in Moodle where you can use it for free, but there are certain analytics options which you have to pay. But compared to the other platforms which I mentioned as paid platforms, Moodle is relatively less, costlier than the other ones.
Question
And
answer.
it's actually more user friendly as well. So it's more user friendly and it is more student friendly also. And it has a lot of, analytics options and dashboard options.
Okay, ma'am. I think there's a question on data privacy on how to communicate with student progress.
Yeah. So as I said, with respect to data privacy, it is important that when we are actually thinking about data analytics, it's important how we are going to store the data, where we are going to store the data, and who will be able to access the data, and to what extent they'll be able to access. So these are some of the things which we have to keep in mind whenever we are doing the data analytics. And as much as possible, wherever possible, it is important that we anonymize the data. So instead of even giving the names for the students, if we can, just give them the roll numbers, so that will actually anonymize it to a certain extent, but not to a full extent. But it is important that we keep it anonymized. And once we identify the learners who are at, in a problem, so it's important that we call them and then we talk to them privately and in a more confidential manner, so that this will give them more, confidence with the teacher, like saying that, yes, this is going to be more confidential, and yes, I'm going to get a benefit out of this interaction with my mentor. So that is very important.
Thank you, ma'am. I think we'll wind up our session if there are no more queries.
Thank you, ma'am.
Yeah, thank you. We'll move on to our next exciting event is the launch of our website. So before we can move on to the launch, IAME is the Interdisciplinary Association of Medical Educationists. It is an association of change and hope. It is an association that focuses on exclusively for medical faculty, fostering constructive discussion, periodic capacity building events, academic conferences, and collaborative journal activities, and academic conferences committed to advancing medical education and professional growth in India. So with this, I'll hand it over to our National Treasurer, Dr. Vijay Karthikeyan sir, to launch our website, and we'll hold a small countdown.
Sure, please.
Yeah. Over to you, sir. So, 3, 2, 1, and that is our website.
Yeah, we have the details of the IAME in this page, and also followed by our vision, mission, key objectives of IAME. Everything is in this page, and we have in the ribbon we have various options like about IAME, where we have just mentioned about what is the registration status, where we registered, what was the need for IAME. We have just included in this section. Then we have academic discourse, where we are going to soon launch a few courses and also a collaborative research project. So in events in 2025, nearly we have conducted 12 events. So we could find the flyers of various events in this section. So next we have the office bearers. So we have starting from our national president, we have this Parmeshwar. Our founder, General Secretary, Dr. Prabhakaran sir, our Vice President, Dr. Ghulam Muhammad sir, followed by various Joint Secretary, Treasurer, and so on. So these are the main office bearers. Followed by that, we have the zonal secretaries. We have zonal secretaries of 5 zones, north, south, east, west, and central zone. We have 5 of them in this zonal secretaries. Then we have nearly 12 EC members who are very much known in the field of medical education, spread across the various states in India. Even from Andaman and Nicobar, we have a EC member. So these are the various EC members of our IAME. Then we have a few wings with us. We have the magazine wing, which is headed by our North Zone Secretary, Dr. Leena Jain ma'am, and Dr. Soumya. We have the 2 members in this magazine wing. And also we have the digital wing, which is headed by our EC member, Dr. Vijita ma'am, along with 2 members. So gallery, the photo gallery has to be updated, and then soon we are going to launch our NJME journal. The updates will be shared in a while. Then we have the membership details, where we have mentioned who can join the IAME. The membership fee for a lifetime member is 3,000. The link has been given, but we will be officially sharing the membership drive. Still, the link is not active. So only we have now the membership was given only to our office bearers. Soon we will be launching it to everyone. Then the contact details, if someone want to collaborate with us, please do mail to this mail ID or contact the number given here. And also we have our social media platforms also incorporated. So this is just a small basic website that we have created, and it is in the process of building. So soon we will be adding various pages and so on. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, sir. It's no small feat to host a website and launch it. So congratulations to all the members who have worked behind it, and congratulations to us on a whole as IAME members. We'll move on to our next session, which is our second session of the day by Dr. Shruti Singh on team-based learning, that is TBC, across disciplines. Dr. Shruti Singh is Associate Professor, Department of Pharmacology, and core committee member, IEC member secretary, AIMS, Patna, Bihar. Ma'am has also got numerous accolades to her CV. She is trained in prestigious medical education programs around the world. She's got a gold medal in microbiology, community medicine, and surgery, and has 52 publications to her name. Over to you, ma'am, to have the next session.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much. Am I audible?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. Thank you to the Interdisciplinary Association of Medical Education for this opportunity. I'm truly, truly honored. President Dr. Pragnesh sir, Vice President Dr. Ghulam Muhammad Bhatt sir, National General Secretary Dr. Kirbakaran, who's a really good friend and my FEMA fellow from GSMC FRI 2027 batch. Dr. Hitesh Mishra sir, my pharmacology senior and a very important figure both in pharmacology and medical education. Also, I'm sure Dr. Vijay Karthikeyan, thank you so much for this opportunity. I'm sure everyone agrees that you're the engine of the organization. Heartfelt acknowledgement to all the other office bearers for their vision and continued support. A great big thanks to my other esteemed speakers, Rajalakshmi ma'am, another esteemed, we are doing this program together. Lovely to have, to be in the same platform speaking along with you, ma'am. It's a real pleasure to be a part of a symposium that is focusing on pedagogical innovations, right? Because this is really where medical education needs to be right now. It's a momentous day for the IAME also, and to be launching our website. It's actually a testament to the tireless and dedicated work of so many energetic individuals, I would say. Hats off to all of you. To be speaking on pedagogical innovations is really an indication of and a signal of where we want to take the organization, not just implementing basics, but breaking barriers with these unique strategies. So by the end of the presentation, I hope that we'll be able to define team-based learning, explain why we need team-based learning, some 4 essential principles of team-based learning. We will be able to identify the benefits of team-based learning, differentiate TBL from other such active learning strategies, and also identify critical contextual factors that affect team-based learning. So talking about the definition, the most widely accepted and cited definition has been given by Dr. Larry Michelson, who's the pioneer of team-based learning. And his definition, the definition that he has given goes something like this. He says that team-based learning is an instructional strategy that uses small, permanent teams and a structured sequence of individual work, teamwork, and immediate feedback to promote both individual accountability as well as the application of course concepts eventually. And I'm going to go a little bit into the history of it also. Actually, this concept is not new. It has been there for a long time. In medical education, it has been taken up recently. It actually originated, like I said, with Larry Michelson way back in 1970s. And this appeared as a strategy to tackle large classes, and it primarily originated in marketing. So, Larry Michelson and other pioneers at that time felt that it was very difficult to keep students engaged and accountable when the class sizes became really big. And over the years, if you can see, it has been widely adopted. It has been adopted in a number of disciplines, number of universities all across the world. And this is really interesting because TBL has crossed disciplinary boundaries. Almost half of the medical schools in the US have adopted it along with problem-based learning. And it is, as we know, already being used in business, engineering, computer science, a lot of these, other proactive disciplines. And this tells us something that TBL does not work because, it is built around how you structure it. It works, and it is not specific to a very, very refined discipline. TBL works because it is based on how adults learn, right? So it's based on the decision making and application and relatability that adults want in education. So let's walk through the team-based learning process. And the process actually begins even before the students come to the class with the pre-work, right? So this usually includes some selected readings, short videos, or other whatever learning resources the teacher decides upon. When students come to the class, the first thing they do is an individual quiz, which is often known as the Individual Readiness Assurance Test. This is followed by a group quiz, which is known as the Team Readiness Assurance Test. Once that is completed, and mind you, the same quiz is given both in the IRAT and the TRAT, right? This is followed by a clarification phase where the faculty member addresses only those concepts that students might have found difficult in the phase of IRAT and TRAT. The most important part of the process actually comes next, where the team applies the concepts that they have learned in the previous phase. And this is where the students actually learn how to solve some real world decision-based problems. If you see down below, running alongside all of this is peer evaluation, which is often 360-degree. So students usually tend to give feedback on how the individual readiness assurance quiz was formulated, what kind of questions, how was the pre-work. So evaluation is continuous by the peers as well as by the students. So what we'll try to do is look at each of the phases quickly, very slowly, so that we are clear regarding the requirements of each of the phases. So the pre-work phase is, kind of the entire TBL rests on this phase. If the pre-work that we have given to the students is weak, the rest of the TBL process simply doesn't function as we had intended for it to, right? If it is too difficult, on the other hand, students might get demotivated and give up here only. So the most important thing to understand is that pre-work is not the first exposure of the student. Its purpose is simply to prepare students with just enough conceptual understanding so that now they become ready to apply these concepts within the classroom. It also establishes, if you see, individual accountability. Each and every learner is responsible for coming prepared before they enter the classroom. And this is not just because their own evaluation, their own performance will be evaluated in the individual quiz, but because their team performance also depends on it. And another thing that we need to remember about the pre-work is that it should be based on a common conceptual baseline. What happens is that many times when our students come to our classroom, we have observed that they are at different baselines, right? They have different levels of prior knowledge. So this pre-work, if followed appropriately, if there is student buy-in, there is a chance that all our students will come to us at the same starting point, right? And from an implementation perspective, from faculty perspective, there are a few principles when we are designing the pre-work. The materials should be very short and focused, right? Not more than 35 to 45 minutes. If we try and overload the students, there's a high possibility that we will create situations of resistance. So, and also it is very important to remember that the pre-work should be such that it is aligned to the individual readiness assessment that is about to come. So, and there is a very important thing to remember here. There is a critical pitfall, which is that unlike flipped classrooms, sometimes what happens is that pre-work is considered recommended reading. It is never recommended reading. It is mandatory reading, because everything that will follow in TBL will depend upon how much buy-in has been there by the students. So if the pre-work is designed well and implemented well, it really sets the stage for the future and the next, steps. Next comes the quiz. And as I have pointed out, this is an individual readiness assessment MCQ test. So if you see what happens with the individual readiness assessment is that there is individual accountability. It ensures that every learner has to come prepared and take responsibility for their own learning in the pre-work phase, because they will be individually assessed. What happens with this is that students also get an opportunity for self-assessment. And with this quiz, they immediately become aware of what all were the things that they did not understand from the pre-work. And from the faculty point of view, this step is extremely useful because what happens is after the students have attempted the IRAT or the first quiz, we are able to identify their knowledge gaps early on, because before they really move into the team discussion or the team quiz, which comes after this. And for the quiz, I believe to work really well, there are another few prerequisites that should be there. From the faculty side, the most important factor is the question quality. So it is very important to remember that the questions at this stage need to appreciate our students' conceptual understanding. Essentially, they should be at the level of knows how, not knows, not just factual recall. Another important thing is it should be directly aligned with the pre-work that has been given to it. We don't want to discourage our students. From the learner point of view, if you see, it ensures that they need to do the pre-work very clearly. If there is no quiz, there is a possibility that they will not go through the pre-work. And once we have assured them by repeated TBL exercises that the quiz that they are going to get is predictable and directly linked to the preparatory material, there is high chance that they will actually come prepared. Also, as teachers, we need to assure them that we are not going to give them certain questions to surprise them or trap them, or, to make them feel like we are superior. We should try and refrain from using our students to establish our superiority by any such method. Time is also very, very critical. The IRAT or the quiz for the individual assessment is usually around 10 to 15 minutes, right? By this, it is ascertained that this is basically a assessment. It is kind of a readiness check. It is not a major exam, right? So it needs to be really small. The exam, the assessment should be really low stakes. And the emphasis here is on learning rather than punishment. Scoring patterns need to be really, really transparent. And if at all our students, score less marks, it should be positioned that these are simply learning opportunities. So difficult questions, very, complex questions at this stage should be avoided. Once we have done with the individual quiz after the pre-work, the in-class theory part includes a team quiz. This is known as the Team Readiness Assurance Test. So ideally what happens is, this is the same quiz that the students have attempted individually. And as per experience and evidence that has come up, students usually remember and enjoy this step the most. Now what we have essentially done is that the same quiz has now been positioned as a team assignment. And now the learning has really, really become collaborative and social and sometimes really dramatic, but in a good way. So what immediately changes here is that the students stop asking what is the right answer. The question shifts from asking what to why am I answering this in this manner? Why do you think like this? And why am I thinking in a different manner? And the foundation of the team readiness assurance test is the peer discussion. That is the value. That is the main thing that is happening here. Here, the individual understanding is translated into collective understanding. Students often discuss together, they reason together, they challenge each other. And but what is important here is a learner mindset. Students also, they need to be active. They need to be willing to defend their thinking, why they are thinking in a certain manner. It is also important for us to have a psychological safety environment here to suggest to the students that disagreements are actually encouraged. You cannot just give an answer and say, okay, I know this and this is right. You need to be able to reason at this stage along with your peers, right? So it really works best when teams are permanent. And I'd like to explain a little bit more down the line how these teams are formulated and what is the ideal number and characteristic of the team. But we do essentially encourage our students to follow group dynamics also at this stage, so that the dominant students, they don't keep dominating the conversation subtly, very, very quietly, with very little faculty interference. We need to pull out some of the quiet students also to get engaged in the discussion. Stage, one thing which is very, very important is immediate feedback. Now, there are various methods by which feedback can be given, and I will show you a slide with the way that the feedback can be given just after this. But one more thing I'd like to point out is that at this stage, what happens is that faculty, and we have observed this many times, that we tend to jump into the dialogue, we tend to jump into the discussion to help students or to hint in a certain direction. But it is best to step back and let the discussion unfold unless we feel that some very, very wrong mental models or frameworks are developing, right? So let me just explain a little bit more about the importance of feedback at this stage. And gold standard of feedback is something known as a scratch card, right? If you see, I have mentioned here that there is a scratch card method which is very frequently used for team-based learning, and it is kind of believed to be the lottery ticket for learning. So what happens is that when teams are discussing a question, they commit to an answer and then they scratch a card. If they see a star, that is immediate feedback and reinforcement and celebration that we have arrived at the right answer. And it may follow with why you have arrived at the right answer. If they don't arrive at the right answer, eventually what happens is that they try to relearn, right? They try to deliberate and then they scratch another option, right? So if the answer is incorrect, they continue this cycle and continue challenging the reasons and looking for reasons why they are wrong. And this sort of has a partial credit system where if you arrive at the right answer in the first go, you get maximum marks and so on and so forth. The marks keep on decreasing. So the system itself provides the feedback here, right? We don't need the teacher to step in. Many a times the star mark and some explanation associated with it, it also reduces the faculty involvement. It reduces the faculty dominance, right? Mistakes are corrected right at the moment. There are other methods also, although the IRAT, these cards, scratch cards are the gold standard, but we do have digital tools also. Several LMS platforms are there. Google Forms are there where you can immediately find out that your answer is correct or wrong. And then it can also be followed by feedback, which is integrated within the Google Forms. We have whiteboards, letter cards, polls, a number of methods are there by which immediate feedback can be given. So, if there is one takeaway from this slide, it is that feedback is not an add-on for TBL. It is a mandatory thing. It is the engine basically that converts discussion into learning, right? So if you can see right at the bottom of the slide, I have very clearly mentioned that it's not an add-on. It is the main engine or the main motor. Now, please be mindful, we are still at the team stage where the team are attempting the quiz. And I'd like you to focus a little bit more on the characteristics of the team that are formed. Now, it is, TBL, the beauty of TBL is that we structure it to a great extent. And the teams are also structured. So one of the core principles of TBL, and, it's a very funny thing that students don't particularly like this fact, but they are not allowed to self-select. They cannot choose their teams, and it's very, very intentional. What happens if we allow them to self-select is that they will select their friends, people with whom they are comfortable. Some teams may become very, very strong. Some may remain weak. So in TBL, it is the instructor that designs the teams and chooses the team, right? And there are various methods by which they do it. One more important thing to remember is that the teams are permanent. Teams stay together for the entire module. It is very, very important because we know that group dynamics evolve in a certain manner. By the end, slowly all the group reaches the stage of norming. So we don't want to keep changing the teams so that they invest more energy in the dynamics within the group. Rather, they spend energy in learning from each other. So it's important to keep the teams permanent. The size also matters. Usually the optimal size that is considered is around 5 to 7. And I would like to mention the secret to success, although for the teams, is the balance. What type of characteristics and what type of people we have within the team and how much buy-in we have from the students. So it is recommended that the team should be heterogeneous. They should be selected based upon their academic performance, gender, personality, or maybe certain skills such as IT skills. So we don't want to create super teams. That's not the idea here. The idea is that it should be balanced. Okay, so that was about the team stage where they are attempting the question. The next stage, clearly, as I mentioned earlier, is about clarification. Now, the TRAT is over. The pre-work they have done, they have given the individual assessment. They have now reached a stage where a lot of discussion has happened and they have arrived to answers for a specific question. Feedback also has been given to them via various methods such as Google Forms or say scratch cards. And they have finally agreed, they have finally come to a conclusion. What is going to happen after the TRAT is over? So this is a very critical moment. This stage is known as the feedback and clarification stage. And actually it is this stage that TBL differs from our usual, teaching patterns. So it is a norm, and we know that this is true for other situations of feedback also, that feedback and clarification, especially in TBL, has to be given immediately and frequently, not next week, not after the exam. It is not supposed to be buried in the answer key, right? It has to work best when it comes immediately after the TRAT. Because it is at this stage that the students are actively, cognitively involved with the questions. They are emotionally invested because as a team, they have gotten emotionally engaged with the assignment, right? So this is the best time. And mind you, at this stage, it is the facilitator's role is not to teach content again, but to clarify and to, close the gaps. With the TRAT, with the result of the TRAT, the facilitator has been able to identify what are the concepts that students are still struggling with. What are the misconceptions that are common? What are the parts where they are not able to reason even as a team? And this information will guide what the facilitator will do next. And this is known as targeted clarification, or what I like to call precision pedagogy. This is where our pedagogical methods and principles become precise and targeted based upon our students' typical learning characteristics. And the goal here is very, very simple. You have to replace blanket lecturing by focused clarification. It is not a time, mind you, to reteach the entire topic at all. And in fact, this is one of the biggest pitfalls. We tend to say that, all right, students are not understanding, why not give another full lecture? And it's very understandable as teachers because it's difficult to teach specific things rather than things within a broader scope, but that is not TBL. So what does it look like actually in practice? So it will look like something like responding to specific students' questions, not delivering any pre-planned slides. It means asking focused questions while the group discussion is happening, probing them for their reasoning, why they are thinking about specific answers. And it also means focusing on why a particular option is correct or incorrect than simply stating. So Socratic method, we are clearly talking about the Socratic method here. Another important thing to remember here is that we are trying to normalize confusion. Students, we are trying to give them an atmosphere where they feel safe admitting that they did not understand something. With this principle, confusion is not failure. If we consider confusion and disagreement as failure, students stop learning, right? Confusion is considered to be normal here. So we focus on reasoning. We do not focus on recall here. And like I mentioned earlier, feedback and clarification is not an add-on. It is basically a bridge between assessment and learning, right? So next comes the stage of team applications, okay? Students have done the pre-work. They have given an individual assessment. The same assessment they have done in the team, feedback has been given to them with the methods that have been employed for the quiz, and also feedback has been given to them and clarification of difficult topics and concepts has been given to them by the facilitator. All that is now over. Now, it is time for a specific problem to be given to the students, which is an application-focused problem. And this follows something known as the 4S framework, which is the heart of the application phase. So this is the most important part, and I'm going to explain each of the S to you. It is basically a 4S. The problem needs to be significant. It is not trivial. It is not recall based. It is real time. It is contextual. It is relevant, right? real clinical or professional decision-making situations can be given. So the second is, we have formed teams. If you remember, we may have 4 or 5 teams with 5 6 members in each. So the second S is the same problem. All of the teams are going to work on the same problem. This is non-negotiable. And why is it important? Because now if you have the same problem, they can debate amongst each other. So it has to be a difficult problem. It may be a management-based problem. And they need to be able to arrive at an answer based upon the understanding that they have developed in the class, right? So, the same problem ensures that comparison is possible, debate is possible, right? The next is, it has to be a specific choice. What does the third S mean? It means that they have to specify for all the application-based problem, they need to specify, give one diagnosis or one option, right? It's not as if that, okay, this is also okay, this is also okay. We are not discussing here. We are committing to a diagnosis. We are committing to a specific management plan. And why is it important? It's very, very important because students at this stage will now learn to defend their reasoning. In real time, as physicians, they need to commit to a diagnosis and go ahead with it, right? So as a team, they will have to come up with a diagnosis which is specific, which will, of course, involve their members' expertise also. Last is simultaneous reporting. All the teams will reveal their answers at the same time, right? It's not as if I get an opportunity, I present first, so the fourth group is going to, resolve all the problems that were associated with my presentation and now come up with an answer which is perfect, right? So it prevents copying. It prevents last minute changes. Okay. So at this stage, if you look at all the 4S together, if you don't give a significant problem, students will not be engaged. So significant problem. If you don't give the same problem, we cannot compare the teams together. If you don't ask them to commit to a specific choice, they will not, there's a possibility that accountability is not going to be there. And if there is no simultaneous reporting, they are more likely to change and there cannot be a debate amongst them because, their answers sequentially will start looking like the perfect answer. So the key takeaway from this slide is that the 4S framework ensures that content knowledge is used and it is not sort of just put out for display and teams learn from each other. All right. So, if you see, there is one thing which is interlinked with all of these phases, and that is the teammate peer evaluation. Now, what does that mean, right? Why is it there everywhere? When exactly does it happen? How is it done? Is it separate from the feedback which is given at the stage of the TRAT? Is it separate from the clarification phase? So the answer is yes and no. To an extent, it does not, in contrast to the feedback which is given after TRAT, you can imagine that peer evaluation does not happen during the early learning phases. It is not a part of the IRAT. And it is not immediate feedback which you get from the Google form feedback. It occurs periodically. It may occur at the midpoint of a module or maybe at the very end. So it's important to remember that this timing is very, very intentional. Peer evaluation is meaningful, we know, only after the teams have worked together. Unless that has happened, how will they evaluate each other? So it's important that they also understand that what are the parameters on which I'm going to be evaluating my teammates, right? So for their contribution, for their engagement, for the level of professionalism that they have shown, right? So it is structured. It is not an anonymous process, right? And usually anonymous, sorry, it is structured, guided, and is usually anonymous process. It does not have any criticism element associated with it. So the criteria, like I mentioned early on, did they prepare for pre-work? Did they contribute to discussions? Was communication respectful, right? So these are some rating scales that are usually used. We use certain Likert scales also. And it is important, peer evaluation is actually very important because it ensures one very big thing, which is accountability, right? If you know that I'm going to be evaluated by peers, there is more chance of accountability rather when we know that we are going to be evaluated by the faculty. And individual effort now becomes very, very important. Professional behavior is reinforced. How is, and coming to the last thing about this, how is it different from the feedback which is given during integrated within TBL? So if you remember, there are different feedback mechanisms within TBL. Okay. The IRAT and TRAT feedback, they primarily focus on knowledge and reasoning. Okay. They're immediate and specific. The phase 4 feedback, which is the clarification, is focused on conceptual understanding. It is faculty led, right? The peer evaluation feedback focuses on professional behavior. It focuses on communication. It focuses on accountability, right? So that is why it is different from the other sorts of feedback which are integrated. And it is very important to remember that this needs to be consequential. The peer evaluation needs to have consequences. Because if there are no consequences, if there is no visible impact, students will think that it is primarily symbolic, right? So it's important to remember that this stage of 360-degree longitudinal peer evaluation is mainly different from the evaluation happening specifically, and its purpose is mainly to ensure that teams are accountable, that they keep working, and other softer skills such as accountability and professionalism are also fostered. Now, let's talk about certain contextual factors that make or break, for that matter, team-based learning. So one of the things is the institutional culture, and we all agree to that. These type of active learning strategies will not work if some level of administrative support, especially infrastructure, is not there. And I would like to say curricular integration and permission is not there, right? Also, another important challenge that evidence has suggested is faculty mindset. We have a lot of years of traditional teaching where the classroom is just a space where we go and teach to cover the syllabus and finish the content. So it requires a great amount of leadership support, right? So, and evidence suggests that change does not always, it does not always come from top down. What happens is even if a single faculty is doing it with some amount of administrative support and departmental support, and they come up with evidence, there's a possibility, and lots of papers are there that suggest that the students become the salesperson and that they start saying that, no, it really works for us, it really helps us, right? Another important factor is faculty development. TBL cannot be implemented effectively by just talking about it. We really, really need to have active training, active support of departments of medical education, structured exposure of the faculty. Various workshops need to be there. Various hand-holding methods need to be there, right? So we do need to ensure that TBL practices and protected time is integrated within the curriculum. It cannot be a one-off experiment, right? It needs to be integrated for it to work. And several universities across the country, across the world for that matter, are basically teaching through TBL and PBL. As you can see, another very important factor is student buy-in. Without student buy-in, nothing is possible. How do we ensure student buy-in? There are lots of methods, but one of the things that needs to begin right at the beginning is orientation. Students need to be oriented to it. They need to be told that it is an effective strategy right on the first day of class. Detailed explanations need to be given to them. We can give them an audio overview or video overview, and we have done that a couple of times where we have given them extensive explanations, and we have seen that student buy-in has improved, right? They need to be exposed to the format that this is how it's going to happen. They need to be given enough time for them to come up with the challenges that they anticipate. So this needs to be done like a participatory action research. It cannot, because as of now, I'm not sure whether a lot of institutions in the country are doing TBL. If we need to begin, we need to have a lot of student involvement, right? So continuous student feedback is inherently a prerequisite of TBL. So last thing we usually tend to worry about is the space, logistics, and infrastructure requirements. But just to be clear here, any place where some students can sit together and discuss is workable. So I don't see that maybe a basic microphone or maybe, very basic infrastructural requirements are there. So mind you, this is not a teaching classroom strategy. We need to remember that it's a sort of a institutional administrative conversation that needs to begin, right? Okay, so one more objective that we had, if you remember in the beginning of the session, was to appreciate how it is different from other such active learning strategies. So now that we have talked about TBL, I'm sure you now know that it begins with pre-class. There are assurance tests, 2 IRAT and TRAT. Then there is clarification phase and then the application phase. Teams are permanent. Pre-class is not recommended, it is mandatory. Accountability exists at 2 levels here, at the same level, at the individual level as well as the team level. In contrast, PBL begins with a complex open-ended problem, right? Students, from the problem, they identify what they don't know. Then there is self-directed learning. Usually the groups are small and not permanent. Usually they are fluid. And the problem comes before the content, mind you. In TBL, in contrast, the clinical problem was coming after content coverage. Faculty here are simply acting as process facilitators. They are not acting as content experts. So PBL is very good for developing learning skills and hypothesis generation. If you can see, it is less structured and it is slightly difficult to scale for larger classrooms. There's another concept known as collaborative learning, and we know that it is simply an umbrella term. It can include a number of strategies. One of them is think, pair, share, maybe some project-based learning. Here also, the focus is definitely on interaction and social learning. But again, in contrast to TBL, the groups may be temporary or permanent, and it's slightly less structured. And very importantly, accountability is very less. In contrast to TBL, you will not see accountability in any of the other methods, right? We don't know who is contributing how much. So individual accountability is less. Quiet students and may disengage, and the dominant ones may overpower the entire conversation and the learning experience. Finally, some may say that, oh, flipped classroom, I'm already doing it. This is some sort of a flipped classroom, I'm already doing it. So yes, content delivery does happen before the class. Class time is used for activities, but flipped classroom may or may not use group work, right? By a flipped method, we can incorporate TBL, PBL, or collaborative learning, agreed. But unless we have fixed teams, unless we have the application phase coming after content coverage, it cannot be called TBL per se. So flipping alone does not guarantee that we are doing TBL or that engagement is there. Okay. So if anyone says that we already do this, so the real question is not that are your students sitting in groups? The real question to answer here is there structured accountability in what you're doing? Is there immediate feedback? Is there decision-focused application? And if the answer is yes, then by all means, we can say very, very proudly and happily that yes, what we are doing is TBL. So, this is something that we actually began with. So I just want to explain how this is scalable to all sorts of disciplines. Let's talk about the clinical disciplines. Here, TBL works beautifully because most of our decisions work around, most of the applications, work around decision-making difficulties. That is one of the core principles of TBL. So instead of asking what is a diagnosis, we may ask what is the most likely diagnosis right now, right? What will you do next? What would change your decision? So questions like this. So TBL sort of mirrors the cognitive process. And if you talk about basic sciences, people usually say that our subject is foundational. How can we use something like this? So in basic sciences, and we have done that in pharmacology, TBL shifts the focus from simply memorizing mechanisms to using the mechanisms to predict outcomes. We have done that for adverse drug reactions to predict the content coverage with a problem with adverse drug reactions or some pharmacokinetic interaction. Very, very much possible and very easily done. So we have asked them questions such as, what does this pathway do? And we have asked them frequently questions. We have given them problems which have revolved around what would happen if certain pathophysiological mechanisms were deranged. So if you also see, this is also clearly interprofessional. Okay. So these sort of TBL exercises are excellent for situations where there is no single correct answer also, especially ethical debates, some policy decisions, or some system level changes even. There are some very popular myths, and let me tackle the myths one by one. The first myth that TBL needs too much faculty. Actually, TBL is faculty efficient. You can work around 3-4 faculty. You can involve SRs. For that matter, we have done this with structured answers because all of them are working with the same problem. All of them, there is a model answer for a lot of them. So sometimes we can also include our postgraduate students. The second myth is people say that it's just MCQs. You're asking quiz 1, you're asking quiz 2, then you're giving them a problem, then you're asking them more questions. But it is to us to ensure that the core principles of TBL are maintained. There is discussion, there is justification, there is some amount of reasoning so that the core principle of TBL is maintained. Third myth, that students will resist TBL. And let me tell you, evidence suggests that students have taken up TBL very, very happily. But if they have been oriented and there has been enough buy-in and preparatory time given to them, right? So let me just talk about the few core principles. At its core, we know that TBL deliberately shifts the focus from content delivery to application, right? Students are expected to come prepared. Class time is not to teach the basic facts, but to talk about higher order application skills, decision making, reasoning. And because of this shift, mind you, class time is reallocated to a lot of justifications, debates, etc. TBL is not just intuitive, mind you, it is backed by a lot of educational research. So who eventually benefits? For learners, if you see, TBL develops essential professional skills also, which we find slightly difficult to teach to our students in a very structured manner, but TBL does incorporate that. So communication, accountability, everything is there. For institutions, if you see, TBL offers a small classroom experience integrated within large classrooms, right? And we can also manage the lack of faculty strength by active learning practices like this. It also bridges the gap between theory and practice, right? I would say that the heart of TBL is the readiness assurance cycle, individual accountability, team discussion, right? So these are all coming up as advantages of TBL. Lifelong learning, if you remember, rote memorization is stopped, interpretation skills, critical thinking, clinical reasoning skills, they are all improved. Large classes can be actively, one of the important advantages is that faculty roles are elevated. Instead of delivering content, even faculty have to work really hard because they need to come up with various types of cognitive and procedural knowledge that will help them reason. So they build their clinical expertise. So in the end, I'd like to summarize that these are the 4 pillars. This was one of the objectives that we began with. Please remember, these are the 4 pillars of team-based learning. They are that the teams need to be carefully and very well managed, stable, and there needs to be effective collaboration between them, and heterogeneous teams need to be there. There needs to be frequent and timely feedback. Application-focused problem solving needs to be given, and student peer evaluation, longitudinal student peer evaluation needs to be there. And this is my take home. Basically, TBL prepares learners for real world practice, if you see, and it mirrors the decision-rich environments which our modern healthcare actually requires and necessitates. And it is more than just plain group work. It is structured group work. And it can be made a scalable instructional strategy that delivers a lot of individual and team accountability. At its core, we have the pre-work, readiness assurance through the IRAT and the TRAT, followed by the application exercise and longitudinal peer evaluation. And each component, like we talked about earlier, has a very, very specific characteristic, purpose, and how it's going to contribute to the overall learning. If you remember, we talked about the 4S framework, which is how the problem or the clinical application part needs to be framed. They all need to have the same problem. It needs to be a significant problem. They need to commit to a specific choice. And in the end, there should be simultaneous reporting, right? Defining strength, if you say, of TBL is that the feedback needs to be immediate and very, very focused and effective, and it is embedded throughout. They receive the feedback, students receive the feedback throughout the learning process, not after it. This helps us to clarify the misconceptions continuously, right? In the end, if I would like to specify on something very, very clearly, is that TBL is not just about adding more content. It is basically about how we improve the way our students learn very by design itself, by structuring the whole process itself. And in the process, we get some additional benefits such as accountability, which eventually tends to improve and give meaningful learning. So thank you so much. That is the end. I will stop sharing my screen now.
Thank you, ma'am, for that elaborate presentation on TBL and its emphasis on how to incorporate it as part of our teaching learning methods. I think the session's open for any queries that anybody, the participants might have.
Hello.
Yes,
Hello,
madam.
madam. Can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am, I
I'm
can hear
Dr.
you.
Sarla, Dr. Shruti.
Yes,
Congratulations for
ma'am.
the talk. One small
Thank you, ma'am.
query. How
Yes,
many
ma'am.
topics were you able to do at your institute as
Ma'am,
TBL?
we have only been able to do about the first time that we started, we were able to do only 3 topics. And mind you, it was a lot of struggle. It is not possible to do more than 3 or 4 topics a year for
Oh,
obvious reasons, because we don't have a lot of, the curriculum is designed in a way that you cannot really integrate it effectively. You need to choose the topics very carefully. For pharmacology, I would say that some of our topics that we covered was when we started with autonomic nervous system, we did a team-based learning where we talked about autonomic nervous system, eventually immediately going into cardiovascular system. So then in cardiovascular system, we only took one small topic, which was hypertension. This was the first year. So the topics that you choose, they need to be a module sort of thing. So when you talk about, say, gout, so that particular module is going to be something which begins with NSAIDs. Then onwards, the application part that you're going to give them is going to be something that is related to, say, gout or rheumatoid arthritis. That is how our various systems are organized within pharmacology. So answering your question, just 3
yeah.
or 4 are possible across the year for
Okay.
us,
For
even
each
now.
topic, how many hours did you spend?
Ma'am, the pre-work was in the form of a SDL. In one of the previous classes, what we usually do is that in one of the previous classes, we give them the pre-work. So the first time that we did it, it usually took around 3 classes, excluding the pre-work. But now that our students are sort of aware of it, and you see every year new batches of students will keep coming, right? So every year you have to orient them. Every year, the first PBL session is going to be really chaotic, where it's going to take a lot of time. But subsequently, by the second module or the third module that you do, about 3 or 4 hours is enough. So what we do is we use the SDL classes. We usually have 3 hours of integrated along with SDL on Saturdays. So for our TBL thing, you definitely need to have protected time. We have identified one protected time, which is when we do integration with SDL. And one more thing I forgot to point out is that TBL can also be used integrated across vertical and horizontally decided topics. Even that is very, very wonderfully executed and a very wonderful way by which integration works well.
So for hypertension, you would have taken 5 hours for TBL.
No, ma'am, not 5 hours, 3 hours. We took 3 hours.
What challenges
Hypertension,
did you encounter?
the biggest challenge, ma'am, was in the first cycle, you will not get students who will actually be coming to you with having done the pre-work.
Okay.
So essentially, what happens is that when you give them the individual readiness assurance test, a lot of them will not do well. So that creates a confusion in us, and that creates a situation where it feels as if we do need to go back and deliver the lecture. Maybe they have not been able to understand. Maybe they have not been able to, whatever reason. So that is one very big challenge. So you need to have a protected WhatsApp group where you keep sending them reminders again and again to read the pre-work and come. Second is when they give the individual readiness, as I said, all your students will be at different levels. So what happens after the IRAT is that you really need to question that, is it that the pre-work that you gave was very difficult for them to understand? Is it your fault? Or is the problem with the students? And it becomes very difficult to ask the students for feedback. They will never come up and say that, no, ma'am, we did not appear or we did not read the pre-work. So you really don't know whether it is the questions that are not working or whether it is the students' participation in the entire pre-work thing which is not working.
Okay.
TRAT, you will not face much problems because the beauty of a team is that when you sit 7, 8 people together in a heterogeneous manner, essentially they'll come up with the right answers. But then the main thing is that another very important problem is that you need to really, all your faculty need to be sensitized. All your faculty need to be at the same level who are actually, because this is a small group thing which is happening, right? So these are some challenges, ma'am, and it is not perfect. It is evolving every day. We tweak a little bit something, but
Okay.
I'm sure, I think if there is buy-in by the faculty, it happens.
Okay, last part.
I
In
think we can
each-
we can let any other participant
Yeah.
ask their queries.
Okay,
Thank you, ma'am.
thank you.
I think there's Professor Dr. Amita Ray who's raised her hand.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Am I audible? Am I audible?
Yes, you are, ma'am. Continue.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Shruti, for an excellent talk.
Thank you.
I just wanted to ask you, how many of your clinical faculty are using the TBL?
I don't think many are, ma'am, at this stage,
Okay.
because we are still at the stage of developing our faculty, doing certain FDPs. We have just done a single FDP for TBL by the Department of Medical Education. So I'm not sure currently. PBL is being practiced, that we know of. But as far as team-based learning is, I don't think so. As of
Okay.
now, we know people, we are doing it. We know people in anatomy who are doing it. Physiology people have just started, but not many clinical. I'm not aware of people in the clinical side. And that's partly because we have not onboarded our faculty on the clinical side to this particular thing. We are in the process, ma'am. We'll do it eventually.
Okay, just sharing with you,
Yes.
we have started doing a TBL on abnormal uterine bleeding
Great, ma'am.
because
How do
it
you do
has
it,
got,
ma'am?
yeah, the same way that you explained to us.
Okay, ma'am.
What
Okay.
problem we are facing mainly is
Mhm.
designing of the questions for the IRAT.
Okay.
And
All right. Yeah, I anticipate that would be a problem
yes,
because they really need to fall in a certain bracket of knows how, and they cannot go very up to
yes,
application-based things. Yes, ma'am, I totally agree. But I think the experts will be the only people who will be able to figure it out
that's
for
true.
specific. Yes, ma'am.
And what we are trying to do is trying to get these questions from from the previous question papers. Because I feel, I mean, just adding a point, I feel that students ultimately they have to answer their they have to pass their exams.
Questions. Of course, yes, ma'am.
Yes.
University.
Yes. And universities have now mandated MCQs as well as very short answers also, which could be used in IRAT. So we are trying with that. As you said very truly, that the problem is many faculty are not oriented. So,
That's a
yeah,
problem everywhere. But
yeah.
very rightly pointed out, ma'am. Thank you so much that I may not have communicated this to everyone. The IRAT doesn't necessarily have to be MCQ based. It's just a quiz.
Correct.
It's just something which is more feasible and practical. So we have also done that at certain points where we have given reasoning, because if you remember,
Absolutely.
I said that the MCQs need to be at the knows how level. So not all type of MCQs will be able to cater to that.
And
So
it's
you will
very
have
difficult to design such MCQs.
Yes.
Very
Yes, ma'am.
difficult.
Very rightly said.
But anyway, thank you for the excellent talk. And I'll also give you, if you send your email ID,
Absolutely, ma'am.
I'll try to share about my TBL experiences as a
Of course.
gynecologist.
Thank you. Thank you so much. It's lovely to hear that clinicians are actually doing it in some part of the country, at least. It gives
Yeah.
us motivation to talk to our physicians also to employ it. Thank you so
Actually,
much.
it's a full-time job. And in the middle, if you get a call that there is a placenta previa bleeding, then everything is gone.
Very true. It's difficult for your side people, ma'am, but we
Yes.
do include residents. Earlier, we were
Yeah.
very hesitant to include residents and students, PG or PGs also.
No,
But
no, residents are very good.
I feel they are
Yes.
very good. Yes.
Yes.
Thank you, ma'am. If that's all, we'll wind up our session and move on to the next. Thank you, ma'am. So our next session is on progressive entrustment decisions by Dr. Praveen Kulkarni. He's working as the Vice Principal and Professor in Department of Community Medicine at JSS Medical College, JSS Academy of Higher Education and Research, Mysore. He has received several research grants from Government of India, ICMR, Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. He's also the recipient of the Young Scientist Award from Karnataka Association of Community Health. Was the principal investigator of Covishield and Covax and has more than 140 publications in various national and international journals. Over to you, sir, for your session.
Thank you very much, ma'am. Yeah. So, am I audible? My slides are
Yes,
visible, right?
yes,
Yeah.
your
Thank you. I
slides are
think
visible.
I'll be the last batsman. So,
Yes.
let me keep the session very crisp. At the outset, I would like to thank all of you and Pratibhan sir for giving me an opportunity to be a part of this entire pedagogical innovation session. So, as we move on, we started with learning analytics. We now discussed about the team-based learning. Now we are going to discuss about something important where you are going to put a trust on your student or your trainee, and you are going to entrust him some responsibilities. Okay, so this is a very unique process where the trust is going to play a major role of giving particular task to a particular student. Okay, so entrustment decisions will be a part of entrustable professional activities. So in my session, I'm going to talk about what is competency based medical education. We are actually appreciating, we are actually practicing competency based medical education. I'm just going to give an outline of that and how competencies are linked to the entrustable professional activities and professional entrustment decisions. We'll try to find out the link between competencies, milestones, and entrustable professional activities, and we'll try to see the various levels of supervision before you entrust a particular activity to the student or a trainee. And we'll try to understand various methods to design and implement this progressive entrustment and enlist various various methods to assess the readiness to professional entrustment. This is a very common framework most of us have actually studied. This is something called the framework for progressive skill acquisition. We all start our learning as novice, and then over a period of time we become advanced beginners, and then we become competent, and with repetitive doing the skills, we become proficient. And at the moment when we start making the decisions and when we start teaching others about the skills, we are considered to be experts. So this is a process that starts at the very beginning and moves over a period of time. Knowingly or unknowingly, we all enter into all these phases until we are called as experts. These are various steps of skill acquisition, and from novice we become expert. Our competency based medical education for the undergraduate students will make the students competent Indian medical graduates. As they progress higher in their education, once they start becoming postgraduate students, and when they start becoming super specialists, they enter into the proficient and expert phase of medical education. So point is, now for the student to be a competent Indian medical graduate, we need to take him from the novice, advanced beginner, competent to some extent the proficient level, so that the expertise can be achieved over a period of time. So this whole competency based medical education is a new paradigm that that is basically what we call it as an outcome based education approach, and it revolves around developing certain set of competencies so that the student is able to, the outcome, what we call a graduate, is able to deliver a particular task in a contextual manner at the end of a particular educational experience. So the whole approach is based on designing, implementation, and assessment of the medical education program using an organized framework of competencies. Who gives these competencies? Usually the regulatory bodies give competencies. In India, the NMC has given set of competencies for the Indian medical graduate. So at the end of the medical education, an Indian medical graduate should come out with who is locally competent and globally relevant, who will be able to serve as the physician of first contact. Considering that the competency based medical education and the framework for competency based education has been evolved. So three important components that all of us need to understand: what is competency based, what is competency, what is competence, and what is competent. Competency is the set of knowledge, attitude, and skills as well as values. When we want a student to diagnose malaria, the student should know the life cycle of Malarian parasite, and the student should know what are the diagnostic tests that need to be utilized. He should perform a particular diagnostic test, and he should be able to interpret that particular diagnostic test. So you have knowledge, attitude, skill, so that the student is considered to have a particular competency. And when the student acquires this competency and able to use it at a actual clinical environment to achieve the professional goal, we call this as a competence. And the person who has performed this activity is called as a competent person. So these are the three important things that we need to understand. I go to a driving school and I learn how to drive, and I learn the knowledge, and I acquire skills, and I'll be able to have an attitude on how to drive a particular vehicle. Second, that is what we call as competency. Competence is when the vehicle is given to me, I'll be able to drive the vehicle with or without supervision. And when I do it, I'll be considered as a competent driver. So these are the three important things all of us as the implementers of competency-based medical education need to understand. We all have started with the specific learning objectives. So specific learning objectives are the objectives for a particular domain of competency. If you take a competency has got different domains: the knowledge, attitude, and skill. And when you have these SLOs for different components of competency, we call them as specific learning objectives. And specific learning objectives together develop, lead to a competency. And these competencies put together, when a student is able to perform a particular task without supervision, we call it as entrustable professional activity. So I was giving you an example. Knowing the life cycle of malaria parasite is a knowledge-based competency, and student is able to test, take a thick and thin smear is a what do you call skill-based competency, and counsel a patient for the treatment in malaria is a attitude-based competence, attitude-based specific learning objectives. And when these three learning objectives are put together, it becomes a competency, that is diagnosis and counseling for a malaria patient. So when the student is able to do it at a controlled setting, we call it as a competency. When the student is able to do it at a real world situation without supervision, without technical support, or without any sort of what do you call information or supervision of the faculty, it is called as entrustable professional activity. The entrustable professional activities bridge the gap between theory of competency-based education to the practice. In the competency-based education, we are going to talk about the competencies. When a student is able to put up these competencies in real life situation without supervision, we call it as entrustable professional activities. And these are essential for a professional practice. So entrustable professional activities are units of professional practice, and entrusted once a trainee can demonstrate sufficient and satisfactory performance without supervision. And these entrustable professional activities are always having a time frame, and they are observable, they are measurable, and they are confined to a qualified personnel suitable for entrustment decisions. A student doing CPR, when a student is asked to do a particular CPR, the student can do CPR under supervision. And when it comes to a real world situation, student should identify when I should do CPR and do CPR without any supervision. And the student should demonstrate that he is competent, he is expert in doing CPR. And at that point in time, you will tell your student, you do this activity on your own, and you are going to trust that particular student that you can do this activity at your own without my assistance. When you are able to give a particular job to a student without your assistance, and when you trust him to perform a particular activity without any supervision from your end, it means that the student has been entrusted with a particular activity. And this entrustment has to happen at a particular time frame. If a student has to learn CPR, the student has to learn CPR by the time he enters into internship. He may learn the basics of CPR in second year, and then he may learn how to perform CPR using a simulator in third year part 1. He may do it in a emergency setting in the final year, and during internship the student should be able to do it with supervision, and during postgraduate the student has to do it independently. It means that you are giving this responsibility to the student. So I am not there, I am going to be in my chamber. When a patient comes, you should identify whether it has to be, the CPR has to be done to him, do it. And am fully confident on you. And these activities should be observable. There should be someone who should observe these activities and finally give a conclusion that the student is has been interested, the student is capable of handling this particular situation. And it should be measurable, to what level of proficiency the student is able to do it. And it should be confined to a qualified personnel suitable for that particular entrustment decisions. So the key word in entrustable professional activity is the student should be able to effectively perform a professional activity without direct supervision from the expert, from the trainer. And it brings the trust and supervision into the assessment process. So we do assessment, we pass or fail a student, we say whether the student has been able to achieve a particular certifiable skill or not. That is fine, but to what extent I really trust this this particular activity. So we were all we are all when we enter into the basics of medical education, we have been taught that the basic aim of medical education is to bring out a doctor to whom I want to consult when I am ill. So when you want to consult a particular doctor when you are ill, you trust that particular person. So if you're a student or a trainee is able to gain that trust and perform the activity, then it means that the student is can be given an entrustment. You can come to an entrustment decision. And it allows preceptors to infer details about a learner's competence. And they are all having the entrustable professional activities lead to recognized outcome. If it is a CPR, the student should be able to perform CPR under an unsupervised circumstance, and it should be independently executable within a given time frame. and interestable professional activities are observable and measurable units, and it requires integration and critical competencies and milestones. We'll discuss about these components in next few minutes. So point is, I thought I'll give some simple example which most of us have experienced in our real life. A father wanted to show the student how to buy vegetables. Father took the son with him to the market, and he demonstrated the son on how to examine the vegetables and how to bargain and how to buy the vegetables. This is a first phase. Eventually, the son was given some sort of independence. The son was asked to examine the vegetables and negotiate on himself with less supervision from father and give money to the vendor. Later, father was a bit more confident on son. The son was able to identify the vegetables, and he was able to negotiate, bargain, and buy the vegetables. Now this is the next level. Now the level of confidence of father on son is increasing over a period of time. At once father is satisfied that my son is able to identify good vegetables, bargain, and able to buy the vehicles, father is going to give money and bag to the son to go and independently buy the vegetables. This is all the story of interestable professional activity. Most of us have experienced it during our childhood. We were all being taught like this, and at the end, when father was confident, father or mother for that matter, confident that I am going to do this task independently, they were relaxing at home and they were able to entrust this particular activity to us. Each one is a different competency. Going to the market, identifying good vegetables, bargaining with the vendor, these are all specific competencies. And when they are put together, when it goes beyond the supervision and reaches the level of unsupervised activity, where there is no need of any sort of guidance from the higher order faculty or the trainee, you are assigning, you are entrusting the responsibility to the student. This is called entrustment and the entrustment decision process. I cannot explain interestable professional activity than the most simplest and commonly encountered situation in all our lives. So whole process of entrustment, a whole process of interestable professional activity is entrustment of professional decision. And how we are going to do it? Entrustment depends on three important things: truthfulness, consciousness, and discernment. The student should be truthful. If something goes right, the student should be able to mention that he has done it right. And something goes wrong, the student should be able to tell this was wrong. And the student should be conscious. And the mentor is also conscious that the student is able to do something in a more professional manner. And the student should have the discernment capability, where the student should be able to differentiate between true or false. The student should be able to differentiate between right and wrong. And the student should be able to differentiate between how to go about and how not to go about. That is discernment. These three basic principles determine whether a particular entrustment decisions can be taken up or not. The entrustment cannot happen overnight. There will be a pre-entrustment phase where the student is able to perform something under supervision, under care, in a controlled situation, and after that the student will be able to perform in an unsupervised fashion, where the student is having adequate level of knowledge, attitude, skill, values, truthfulness, consciousness, discernment to do a particular activity. So what is the difference between competencies and interestment professional activity? Competencies put together become interestable professional activity. Competencies are the components which are having the knowledge, attitude, and skill related to particular task. The student should possess knowledge, attitude, and skill in a subjective manner. And once they develop these skills, the student is able to perform something utilizing these competencies in an independent manner, in an unsupervised manner. It is called as interestable professional activities. And why on this earth we should have the interestable professional activities? So the learning has to be objective in nature, and ultimately the patient safety is very important. So you are going to put the patient, a student to do a particular task on a patient with your trust. The patient has come in search of you, and you are giving the responsibility of handling a particular activity to your student whom you trust. And it is going to help in contextual learning, developing contextual learning abilities. And the whole process is centered around a concept which is subjective in nature, which is a qualitative attribute, that is what we call as the trust. It is, the whole process is feedback driven mechanism on progressive learning of skill for a particular task completion. When you want to really work on the interestable professional activities, first ask what is the work to be done by the student. Should he do a CPR, or should he measure blood pressure, or he should take a history? Or it could be diagnosis and treatment of schizophrenia. We don't know. You need to identify what is an EPA that you need to assign to the particular student. And then these interestable professional activities should be purely professional in nature. They are work related activities, okay, not theoretical. And what trainees must demonstrate before you trust them to do the work? The trainee should identify the competencies that are necessary to achieve the EPA. If it is something related to CPR, the student should know when should he do the CPR, the process of doing CPR, the steps of doing CPR, and when to intubate the patient, and when do you declare the CPR should be stopped. Okay, and achievement of these competencies are required before the student is interested to perform a particular task. And how should the trainees be prepared to meet these requirements? So the trainees have to identify the competencies underlying EPAs, and knowledge, attitude, and skill acquisition that has to go for assigning these EPAs, and what are the teaching learning methods they need to adapt. And how do we assess the trainee's readiness to pass the threshold of interestment? Do I need to assist the trainee, or can I leave this trainee to do the task, and tomorrow morning when I come, the student will report it that I have done it and I'm happy with what student has done? Will I trust the information that is given by the trainee through the records tomorrow? So I really need to, at what level the interestment has to be given, the trainee has to be aware. When we want to talk about the stakeholders in interestable professional activities, that is a number one, the trainee, where the skills, knowledge, and trustworthiness, self-awareness of the trainee are essential components in entrustment. Supervisor, the supervisor should have adequate experience and trusting tendency. There will be some people who trust and there will be some people who do not trust, and we need to ensure that trainee is having a trusting tendency and familiarity with the trainee's competencies. And what is a task complexity that you are going to assign? What is a level of risk? What EPAs you are going to assign to the first year student? What EPAs you are going to assign to the second year postgraduate? What EPAs you want to assign to the third year postgraduate? So the task complexity and predictability are essential. And in what context or learning environment you want the student to develop these competencies, whether it is at the clinical setting, whether it is a primary care setting, or whether it is at the level of camps, or whether it is at the level of labor room, operation theater, where exactly you want the student to learn or develop these interestable professional activity. And when you talk about the progressive entrustment, I was making a mention, there will be a set of competencies, and these competencies are acquired at different levels. We call them as milestones. And once a student achieves all these competencies at different milestones, they are expected to perform the task in a real world setting. We call them as entrustable professional activity. What are these milestones? The student should be able to perform a task at different levels. For example, if a student has to diagnose a particular case, for a student should be able to diagnose fever, the reason for fever, the student should be able to do it at different levels. Starting from first year, the student should know what is pyrex, what is normal body temperature, milio interior, and in second year he should be able to identify what are different pathological conditions leading to fever, and then pathophysiology of fever. And then over a period of time, in third year part 2, students should do a differential diagnosis for the fever, and in final year the student should be able to diagnose a case of fever with certain set of investigation. So these are all different milestones a student has to attain. So multiple milestones will integrate into entrustable professional activity. The difference between the milestone and EPA is milestones are the tasks, EPAs are the tasks the student has to perform. But milestones are different stages at which the student should train himself, or student should expose himself, expertise himself to develop the level of competence to attain that particular entrustable professional activity. So if you take entrustable professional activity as ability to care for a patient with acute medical condition, so these are all the milestones the student has to acquire. I was giving you an example of fever. So similarly, if you want a student to care a patient with an acute medical condition, these are all the milestones the student has to acquire over a period of time. So what are stages of progressive entrustment? The first level is the student is going to observe what the teacher is doing, what the trainer is doing. And second, the student will perform it under direct supervision. Third, the student will perform it under indirect supervision. The trainer is not there in the room or in the ward. Trainer is somewhere in his cabin or somewhere in the hospital, but the student is going to perform a particular task. But whenever there is a need, the student will call the supervisor. He in the immediate vicinity, he will come and help the student. And the student is going to perform at level 4. Student is going to independently practice it and report it to the supervisor. And finally, at level 5, the student performs it and he will be able to train his juniors also. Let us take example of lumbar puncture. The faculty is doing lumbar puncture at level 1. The student will just observe it. At second level, the student is performing lumbar puncture and there is the faculty who is standing next to him. And third level, the student is performing lumbar puncture. Faculty is not there with him, but faculty is there somewhere in the hospital in the immediate vicinity. With just phone call, the faculty will come and help the student if something goes wrong. And in level 4, student performs lumbar puncture and he completes the activity and he will report to the supervisor or the faculty next day when he comes that he has completed this particular task. That is independent practice. And at the end, the student is so competent that he will perform the activity and he will teach this to his juniors also. Now the student from student has become a teacher. This is a level of entrustment. So we call it as stages of entrustment. They can also be told, number 1, the first stage is the student is not permitted to act. He can only observe. Second, the student can perform the act under direct, proactive supervision of the supervisor present in the room or vicinity. The supervisor is standing just next to the student and he is giving guidance proactively to the student on how to perform lumbar puncture. Number 3, permission to act with indirect supervision, but the supervisor is not present in the vicinity, and whenever there is a need, the student can immediately call him. Next is permission to act under distant supervision and not directly available. So as I told, the teacher is there at home and the student says, I'm going to do the lumbar puncture. He says, you do the lumbar puncture, I trust you, and once you complete it, tell me tomorrow, and the student is going to tell it tomorrow. And then the last level, that is level 5, that is where the student is ready for entrustment, that the permission, the student does not need permission to provide particular task. The student can perform it, and he can supervise the juniors, and he can train the junior levels. This is the level of progressive entrustment. These are some of the examples for entrustable professional activities, like history taking of a patient visiting OPD with abdominal pain. This is a very simple entrustable professional activity. But do you think it is so simple that anybody can do it? So there is a need for developing this entrustable professional activity with set of competencies. Like if the student has to take the history from the patient, the student should have the communication competence, the student should have the clinical competence, the student should have professionalism competent, and the student should be a learner. So all these things, competencies put together, the student will be able to develop this particular entrustable professional activity. Next, second could be pharmacological management of uncontrolled hypertension in inpatient setup. It could be providing end of life care to a patient with stage 4 colon cancer. These are entrustable professional activities. So conducting a family education session for the patient with schizophrenia, managing acute gastroenteritis patient in a community care setting. So these are some simple examples of entrustable professional activities I am giving. So there are a lot of work is going on in entrustable professional activity, as we are all still stuck at the level of competency-based medical education, where the implementation of CBME is at different stages at different institutions. Now we need to go a step beyond, put these competencies together and develop entrustable professional activities so that the students can perform the task independently in an unsupervised fashion. Coming to how to teach entrustable professional activities. So the curriculum has to be designed in such a way that EPAs are at the center of curriculum. So can you teach entire MBBS curriculum as EPAs? No. Only certain skills can be taught as entrustable professional activities. So do we, when it comes to undergraduate medical education, we cannot have complete set of EPAs to be entrusted to the student. Simple EPAs can be assigned as a part of overall. For example, counseling a couple for accepting a particular family planning method could be an entrustable professional activity. Or, administering ORS to a child having, acute gastroenteritis with severe degree of dehydration, so moderate degree of dehydration. So that can be an entrustable professional activity. So when it comes to post graduation, you are all free to decide your entrustable professional activities at your department level, your specialty level, and at least have some EPAs prepared and make students learn those EPAs and evaluate them, so that you are at the end, you are more confident on your students that they are able to perform a particular task. Case-based learning is the best example on how to develop entrustable professional activity. We were discussing about the team-based learning. Now that is another way how we develop the competency entrustable professional activities. And then you can have skill and simulation center. Now skill and simulation based learning is becoming a very important method of medical education, where the risk to the patients is going to be less. The student can develop multiple skill sets at the simulation setting and then take it to the real life situation and practice it. So skill and simulation based learning. Now we have cadaveric workshops. If administering a particular nerve block, let us say brachial plexus nerve block, the student should be able to perform. That is the entrustable professional activity. The cadaveric labs are being used for making the students learn the pre-entrustment level competencies. And once a student is completely confident over here, the student will go and perform it in real life situation, and over a period of time with multiple attempts, the students develop the competence, or and develop the entrustment level of competencies. And intense skill training. And there is one very interesting, there are many approaches. One approach I felt very interesting is Peaton's 4-step approach in developing the skills. In initial level, we call it as demonstration. The trainer, let us take, we are working on lumbar puncture. Let us start with lumbar puncture only. In the first step, what we call as demonstration, trainer performs the lumbar puncture without any comment at any level. So the trainee is just going to observe how the teacher is performing lumbar puncture. That is called as demonstration. At second level, we call it as deconstruction. In deconstruction, the entire lumbar puncture, the teacher is going to divide it into multiple steps, and the teacher is going to give a live commentary that this is the position of the patient I need to keep, and this is how I need to put a drape, and this is how I need to clean, and this is the place where I need to palpate to identify the space, and this is how I need to prepare my needle. I am inserting the needle, and I am going to get the grating sensation, and then I'm going to draw it, and how do I adjust the needle. Every step the teacher is going to deconstruct and train to the student. So this is a running commentary. The trainer does something, and at every level the trainer is explaining what they are doing, and then trainee is asked to perform the same task with the same level of running commentary in presence of the trainer. And finally, the student or the trainee does it without commentary. The observer is going to, the teacher is just going to check how the student is doing. It is called as performance. When these activities are deliberately practiced over a period of time, then the skill acquisition takes place, and it goes to the level of entrustment. So you can relate to any of your method. It could be CPR. The student is, the teacher is going to demonstrate CPR. He will not talk anything. At second level, the teacher is going to do CPR and explains every step of doing that CPR with running commentary. Third, the student is asked to do that particular task, and the student is going to do the task, explaining everything what he is doing, and there is a feedback that is there as a part of this whole activity, and finally the trainee does it. This is how I'm almost coming to the end of my presentation. Sorry, I'm taking a bit time, so I'm just finishing it in another 3 to 4 minutes. So this is how EPA looks like. A simple title of EPA is routine checkup of the stable adult patient. And what are the specifications? Measuring vital parameters like blood pressure, oxygen, respiratory rate, and heart rate. Then explaining all actions to the patient and reporting the results. And what is the context at which the student has to develop this EPA, ambulatory or inpatient setting? What are the most relevant domain of competencies? Like they're all CAN-MED competencies. You can put them as the NMC competencies. In NMC, there are competencies like clinician, communicator, lifelong learner, professional, and so on. So there are 5 competencies that NMC has designed. So you can put those core competencies over here. And I want your attention on it. Entrustment for which level of supervision is to be reached and at which stage of training. So if you want the student to develop this particular entrustment, so you have to go till level 3, that is indirect supervision. Ultimately, before the transition to the second full-time clerkship. So this at level 3, what is level 1? the student will be just observing. Second will be performing, the student will be performing with immediate vicinity of the supervisor. Third, the student should be performing it when the teacher is at the distant level. At least at this level, if the student comes, that is level 3 of entrustment, so I am satisfied that the student is having this entrustment activity. Level 4 and 5 can be taken at a later stage. So how do we arrive at the entrustment decisions? Number one, you can go for written or electronic knowledge testing. The student knows about it or not. You can go for simulation based setting. The student is able to perform a normal labor or not. If the student is able to do it at the simulation setting, at least we are to some extent confident that the student is going to do it at a real life setting, and you observe the student there in real life setting, and you give an entrustment for that. OSCE is again a basic step before going for entrustment. Case-based discussions, short case or a long case, ward rounds, or it could be a short practice observation or a long practice observation. And the most important methods for going for entrustment decisions are workplace-based assessments, like direct observation of procedural skills, mini clinical examination, multi-source feedback, mini PAT, etc. There are many ways in which you can I'm sorry. So you can go for workplace-based assessment, and you can check whether the student is able to perform a particular task at a real life situation, and then you give an entrustment. So what are the foundational qualities for for entrustment? When I will say I am going to entrust a particular decision to the student, number one, there are 4 foundational qualities, and there are some qualities that are called as additional qualities. The first quality is the student should have adequate knowledge, attitude, and skills, and you should be having ability for clinical reasoning. And second, the student should have conscientiousness and reliability. Student should be able to know what to do and when to do, and show the same thing being done at different time intervals, what we call as reliability. And students should demonstrate truthfulness and honesty. The student should tell what went well, what did not go well. If something goes correctly, he should be able to tell whether it was correct or not, how he can improve his skills in future. The student should be able to admit what went well and what did not go well. Fourth is discernment of limitations and inclination to ask for help if truly needed. The student should know what is right and what is wrong. When the things are going out of control, when should I ask for help? And the student should have that consciousness that if at this level I will be asking for the help. And at no point in time the student should feel scared about the teacher. If I report this to my teacher is going to scold me. If this happens, then the entrustment decisions cannot happen. It is a free flow of learning environment. It is the student should feel that the environment for learning is conducive, and people there are going to help him to develop him or her to develop the certain level of competencies. And when this happens, the entrustment becomes more sound. Like the student should have empathy, openness, listening abilities, receptiveness towards the patient, and skill in collegial and interprofessional communication and collaboration. The student should have self-confidence and feeling safe to act, and a habit of ongoing self-evaluation, self-reflection and development, sense of responsibility, and adequately dealing with mistakes of self and others. So as a part of our postgraduate training program, it could be clinical, pre or paraclinical subject. So we will be observing all these things among the students, knowingly, unknowingly, and we trust our students. That is entrustable professional activity. But when it is objectively measured, and when you put a time frame to it, it is going to qualify for certification of entrustable professional activities. There are several challenges in EPAs, like identifying suitable EPAs for your particular profession specialty, and once you develop EPAs, how to validate them, and how to assign milestones, and how at what level of competence you will say the student can be interested. Mapping EPAs with existing competencies is another challenge, and designing tool for teaching and assessing EPAs like multi-source feedback, case-based learning, what exactly I want to use when, and training the assessors on evaluating EP. EPA assessment cannot happen at one point in time. There is something called a summative entrustable professional activity assessment. We call it as a licentiate exam, where the student is going to perform a task on a real life situation, and you are certifying that the student is able to perform something in the real life situation. So formative entrustment and summative entrustment, how you are going to train the assessors on evaluation of EPAs, is something that is again a major thing that we can think of. And if you implement EPA based assessment, it is going to be a paradigm shift in the assessment method. So where you are going to give out a job ready physician or job ready surgeon to the community, where the community can trust him or her, and you are having trust on your student, your trainee, that this student is able to perform. And this has to happen in a progressive manner, and that is what we call as progressive entrustment of decisions. And how we are going to achieve it, I was able to inform to all of you over last say 30-35 minutes. So ultimately, the medical education, health professional education, has to work on developing the medical graduates on whom the trainer can trust, institutions can trust, communities can trust, patients can trust, and the regulators can trust that the student is able to perform the task independently without anybody's supervision. So this is all I wanted to convey. Thank you very much for the opportunity.
Thank you, sir, for that eye-opener session on entrustable professional activities. And I think most of us as educators would find it an innovative but a difficult concept to wrap our brains around. So we'll have a quick session on queries if anybody has it, because we are running late as such. We are past most of our dinner times, I think. So if anybody would like to have a quick...
Hello, madam. Can I ask?
Yeah, sure.
Dr. Praveen Kanraj, I'm Sarla here.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you so much.
Praveen, to what extent you all have used EPS for UGs?
Ma'am, UG EPS we have not yet introduced, but for PGs we have started in some of the departments. Like in pediatrics, we have started on neonatal resuscitation and diagnosing neonatal sepsis, and difficult to feed babies, how we are going to feed them, cleft lip and palate babies, how we are going to teach feeding by the mothers. So few EPS we have identified in pediatrics and few in general surgery, and few in medicine, like as I told, lumbar puncture and doing CPR, and then managing acute abdomen in general surgery. Few of them we have identified and we have implemented. But undergraduate medical education as such, EPAs are not identified much.
Okay, Praveen, thank you.
Thank you.
Anybody else?
It's a very complicated session. I think EPA, you need to have a complete workshop itself on understanding what is EPA, because as I was telling, we are stuck at competency-based medical education. So we need to go ahead and learn about EPAs. That takes a bit more time, but at least be aware that EPA is something that is going to come up in future.
Yes, so thank you, sir. And I would like to use this opportunity to thank our national president, Professor Dr. Pragnesh P. Parmar, our vision lead and national general secretary, Dr. Kripagaran S., and our national treasurer, Dr. Vijay Karthikeyan, sir, and all the other EC members for being the constant pillars of support for the activities of IAME. And sincere gratitude to all the speakers today who are wonderful and had such insight on the innovative pedagogical topics, and all the participants who joined us today for making this symposium a wonderful session. So with that, we will have our feedback form put up in the chat box. Please fill that up for your e-certificate. And the recorded video will be shared in YouTube in 3 working days. So with that, we duly apologize for running late, and thank you all for your active and patient listening. Have a nice day.